All right. Well, I've been, doing a lot of different lectures in a lot of places, and I guess I've started to really feel like, we have a lot of information, we have a lot of people talking about nutrition. There's so much change happening in our worlds, but I feel like the needle's moving pretty slowly still. Like if I look at conventional medicine, I look at um, overall what's happening in the pet food industry and things like that, because I deal with nutrition. Um, it just seems so slow still, even though you can see if you go on social media and if you're sort of in our world, you're like, oh, everybody understands this, everybody knows that. But I really feel like there's still this sort of nutritional emergency going on, and we're not there. We're not there. And part of it is, I just sort of wonder if we don't understand that, or if what are we prepared to do, and what are the reasons. So I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about what are the emergencies, and what can we do about that, and also understanding that when there's an emergency, we may not know what to do. Let's see if I can get that right. Oh, I put in an introduction slide because I've had people before ask me, like, how dare I talk about this, or who am I? Um, this is who I am, if you want to know. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I just wanted to start out by saying nutrition has no role in health. Just feed whatever you want, it won't make a difference. And that's basically my talk. Okay, that's not true. But I hear that a lot. And I just feel like we really should know that, people say nutrition has no role in cancer and no role in cancer treatment. Feed whatever you want, it won't make a difference. I see that in human medicine when I have, my clients that are going to they have a child with cancer, and they're in the cancer unit, and they say, you've done your chemo to this child, and then they're like, you get donuts today because you've done such a good job, or here's your lollipops, or here's your hospital food, which is often horrifying. And it's the same it seems to be the same. So, sorry, this is a little slow. Where I feel like we're talking a lot about, these treatments and everything else, but we're not doing enough to really say it matters what you put in your diet in other ways as well. The specialists that I deal with, oncologists recommendations, there's these poor prognosis, and it's just not going to go well, and all of these things. It's because of long experience with animals, and people eating poor nutrition, poor diets. They're not doing what it takes to keep the body healthy, even if they have all the medicine in the world. And the cancer treatments in general, when I'm talking about cancer treatments with oncologists, often they're discouraging diet changes. They're like, at this point, don't change the diet. We're going to be messing up the GI tract. We can't do that. Us to as veterinary practitioners in general, they're not very helpful. They're processed. And then if you go to a hospital, if I send my patients to the veterinary hospital for overnight or after surgery or whatever, the food they're feeding them is pretty horrible. So we're still in our minds somehow. I don't know if it's global or if it's everywhere, but I definitely know it's in the US, where we're still saying it's almost out loud, like, food doesn't matter and it doesn't make a difference for health, so don't worry about it. Prevention isn't really valued very much. People feel that nutritional success is minimal, where it's absolutely not, but it's because they don't know how to do it. All right. So I do feel like we also get a little bit of flack for the fact that, we don't really know everything about nutrition. So there's dark matter in nutrition, right? There's some limited study. People get confused about ketones. They're confused about metabolic cleanup. They're confused, even about things I'll talk about briefly here. What are fats? What kind of fats are there? So there's so much that people are confused about. So they sort of conflate that to mean that we really don't know enough about nutrition to even do anything. And so then medicine will sort of take that and then delegitimize common sense. They'll just say, even though you sort of, this makes sense that nutrition matters, like, no, in medicine it doesn't really matter. It's fine. We're going to do all these medicines. It's going to be okay. So is there a nutritional emergency? I think there really is. I think there's an emergency in general. So I feel like people often will ask these questions. They'll say, did food cause my pet's cancer? Are these things, are they bad? Rather than even focusing so much, or can they be really good and turn things around? So, we're not going to likely determine the cause of all of these cancers because there's so many things that go into making cancer for, or whatever disease we're talking about, right? So there's all this list of things. But food obviously can play a role in the development of cancer, and the negative side of food is becoming more and more accepted and understood. And there's lawsuits and things about even, additives to food and glyphosate and all of those things. So again, the negative side of it is coming up. It still doesn't seem to stop people from feeding those things because the pet food industry is rife with that. I mean, if you're feeding any pet food that just has chickpeas in it, it's got so much glyphosate that's really it shouldn't be done, but we're still doing that kind of thing. So what are the nutritional emergencies right now in veterinary medicine? I think it's pretty much it's a house on fire. So I know you've been through sort of a long day of a lot of science. I'm just going to read sections from my book about emergency, and this is how I think about emergencies. Okay, so this is from the first chapter in my book. But without thought or hesitation, I darted into my burning house. Now, 3 steps in, the heat is intense. The ceiling's on fire, and I'm already gasping for air. Black clouds of smoke roll at me from the kitchen. Eerie flickers of light create quick silhouettes. As I drop to the floor, narrowly avoiding some falling debris, the thought crosses my mind that I might die. But the bedroom where my pets most surely are hiding is only 1 room away. I have to get there. I hold my breath, crouch low, and prepare for one quick dash through the smoke. But there's someone else in the room with a different idea. I hear his muffled breathing through the firefighter apparatus, and suddenly I'm hauled upwards by strong arms. Many people say they would die for their pets. I don't doubt it. I've been there. It's a choice we don't often have to make, but we feel certain we would do it just the same. I've also known pets that have sacrificed themselves for their owners. That's how deep the bond goes. But are we willing to be proactive and use that loving energy to save our pets' lives a little bit every day? An emergency exists now, much less obvious than the threat of a fire, but I see it daily. Increasingly, pets are suffering from the same maladies as humans: thyroid, liver, autoimmune, adrenal, kidney disease, arthritis, seizure disorders, and cancer, because they live the way we live and eat the way we eat, the environment we have created for ourselves. They have inevitably fallen victim to the same illnesses that plague us. So since many of us have come to believe that these diseases are an inescapable part of modern life, we don't think it's strange that the same fate should befall our pets. But as veterinarians, we are uniquely situated to make a difference in the health of all animals. And I believe that's true as pet owners as well. We want to know how to improve the health of our pets. We want to understand the crucial connections and interactions between the health of our patients, the food, animals, and plants, the health of the pet, and the pet and veterinary industry, and ultimately our own health and the health of our planet. So to me, there's no part of nutrition that's too small or unimportant or too big to be tackled or to be considered part of this emergency. From the smallest microbes in grains of healthy soil to the largest plants and animals involved in pet food, we are all intricately and inextricably connected. We may not know yet everything about pet nutrition, but we know enough to do better. And even though commercial pet food is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, it needs our help too. So I sort of start with that and saying again that even though we know a good diet can't cure everything, a bad diet will always cause health problems. Now, I put this up. This is sort of the end of my talk, but I just want you to know I'm not just going to be all fluff. I have sort of quick overviews on things that can really help in different conditions. So this is a quick overview of nutrition for different health conditions. So you'll see this again at the end of the talk, but just so you know, I look at these things and I think of some things that you can always think about. You should always, if you're like, okay, I have joint disease, I should be talking about low carbs. I have seizures, I should be thinking about keto. I've got cognitive dysfunction, and I put mushrooms up in the corner on both slides because, you should always think about mushrooms. But there's lots to do with nutrition as therapeutic. But I do feel like we need to be able to battle and talk about, why are we not using the power of nutrition to heal? So the biggest thing that people say to me is cost, and that's one of the things people say, I just can't afford to do that food. Can't afford it. It's too expensive. And we really need to change that conversation. We need to make sure that people understand they can do a little and still make a difference. And I talk a little bit later about there's some good research on that even just adding a little bit of, great food helps. But in general, we should also be appalled at how cheap food can be and how badly it's created and how much is wrong with the industry and how much is wrong with how we raise animals and what we do to put together a food. So I do think we need to change that conversation and say, no, it really shouldn't be that cheap because all of these animals have to live and be fed, and we have to do appropriate formulation, and we have to carefully and kindly and humanely treat them and deal with the slaughter and deal with the way that we store them. So all of those things cost money, and it should actually be something we spend money on. There's a lot of influence from the pet food industry. As I said, multi-billion-dollar industry. There's, lots of interest in keeping the status quo, their marketing, the investments, the research bias, the convenience, which is a big one too also. But I think we need to take back professional control, from the veterinarians to the people in the pet industry to pet parents as well. All of us need to take back control of this world and say, no, we have common sense. We're going to feed what's appropriate. And then we have, scientific concerns where people are saying, oh, what about pathogens? What about, are you balancing properly? Or are you too much worrying about balance? Do you have good proof? Are there contraindications for the food that you're recommending? So we need to add data as much as we can. So this type of a conference, this type of sharing of ideas is essential. We need to add data with cases and studies, and we need to be thinking about that. So bravo to DogRisk for doing that for us. It's making a huge difference, but we more, by the way. So, put more money into it and put more energy into this. And then professional liability comes into it from veterinarian standpoint, where I personally have been, had license threats because I'm recommending things that other vets don't. There's standard of care, there's censure, there's ostracism. My colleagues,
Take it away.
You okay? Oh, sorry. Did someone have a question?
Can you ask somebody to put off their mic, please?
Oh, sorry. I just thought I heard someone, but yeah, maybe it's just a mic. Make sure you're muted. Otherwise, yeah. I get so easily confused now. Okay. So the standard of care, the censure, ostracism, social media reaction. There's a lot of, people are very willing to be rude and judgmental. And this can be scary if you're going off a little bit from what the conventional wisdom is about medicine. And I've had that recently where I've had a client that left and moved away and went to a different veterinarian who absolutely spent her entire appointment saying what a terrible veterinarian I was to recommend fresh food and that I was killing the dog and all of these things. And the woman was so confused, and she sent me a terrible email saying she couldn't believe what a bad vet I was. I was like, wow, I don't even know how to fight this. Because she's, living in a different state, and I don't know what to do. So these are all things that it happens. And her dog was one of those animals that actually had gotten a lot better with nutrition. But even though the common sense was there, science gets really hard and says, no, that's not true. It's not common sense. You shouldn't do that. So it's hard. And then we're threatening a lot of interest of people doing those things. They don't want to be told that they're wrong. So we've got all of those things going on. But we need to change the conversation and protect our families and protect ourselves. So one of the things I say to people a lot, when you feel like things are going wrong, learn something new. That's what my mom always said to me. So I believe in saying that to people. And we need to think about, why is nutrition not a major part of veterinary study? Where can we get better information? Who's providing the current information in the narrative, and who supports education? So again, a conference like this, the College of Integrative Veterinary Therapies, which I'm the CEO of, we teach nutrition classes specifically so that we can know the most we can know, and then do better and do the best you can do. Nothing can be perfect, and it really almost shouldn't be, but we should at least know what we're doing, and we should understand the science behind what we're doing. So I feel like we have a global responsibility to do this, to learn more, to do better. to advocate for pets, for owners, even for our governments, for our industry. We need to be advocates for that. We need to think about the purity, integrity, and integrity of ingredients, and the soil, the richness of the soil. Use animals that are raised in a humane way and have responsibility. So can we do it all? I actually think we can. I think we're in an industry where we can do all of this. So, small jobs, but we can do it. So, fresh fruits and veggies, right? So people talk a lot about you can add a little bit of fresh fruits and veggies and make a huge difference, even in a kibble diet. It's completely true. And once people see that, they start to change to more fresh food in general. So the fresh fruits and veggies, even though there's carbs, they also are providing natural phytochemicals and flavonoids and vitamins that are more chemoprotective and have cancer-fighting properties. So I talk a lot about cancer because it seems to be the emergency out there, but it really does, it relates to all inflammation that's out there. So this one was the transitional cell carcinoma in Scottish Terriers. Those that got fresh veggies 3 times a week or more had a decreased risk of cancer. So if they just eat more fresh leafy vegetables, yellow and orange vegetables, they have a decreased risk of having this cancer that is common in this breed. So we can be using nutrition more to help in those conditions. So I show this picture because you can see my pets here. Because why not? They're animals and it's so fun to look at. But the dog with the little arrow next to him, that's Darwin. He's 14. And I think 3 years ago we diagnosed him with a liver tumor, prostate tumors, and he has had elevated liver enzymes and some issues with his urination on and off. But it's been that long, right? And his diagnosis was, basically from the internal medicine people was like, yeah, he's going to be in serious trouble pretty soon. Well, he's at our farm running and playing and fine at this moment. So the prognosis is going to be different. And if you're doing the right thing and letting the body help in terms of the mitochondrial cleanup and helping with the negative energy balance that cancer cells create. And then trying to maintain the muscle mass with good proteins, keeping cellular nutrition healthy with good fats, and avoiding these side effects from cancer and any kind of treatment for cancer. He has only really had any more natural treatments for cancer at the moment because there really isn't anything much in Western medicine to help him more than, he's neutered and all of that. So I always think about some of the basics so that it helps me think through every case that I'm looking at. And it keeps me putting the pieces of the puzzle together because it's sometimes it can be a little bit exhausting to, remember everything while you're dealing with cases, or you're dealing with your own animals. So I'm always first talking about the quality of the food, the macronutrients, the micronutrients, the freshness, the purity, the digestibility, and trying very hard to understand if I'm buying a food from a company, can we get information?
There's so many great explanations.
And then the frequency, the amount of feeding, the calories themselves are very important. So I recommend for dogs, I know we were just talking about, when you eat, how often you eat and the timing of day and that kind of thing. For me, I think about the natural system in a dog is going to be, they're not going to know that every day at 4 o'clock a rabbit, comes out and that's what they get. So it's not natural for them to get fed at the same time every day. So random feeding once a day is very important for me to convince owners that they really should try to get to that if they can. And I've gotten to the point where even with some of the little dogs, the really, small little 8-pound or, 4-kilo dogs, no problem. They still do pretty well with once a day feeding and snacks now and again. I like superfoods added in, from algae to broccoli to, sardines to eggs. I've got a list of those a little bit later. And then biome support, making sure you're supporting the microbes and with fiber and with probiotics, good, healthy, alive foods now and again. Motility support is a lot to do with making sure that exercise is happening. I have a lot of animals that have GI problems really because they're just not exercising enough. Then they don't have an appropriate moisture content if they're feeding a dried food, freeze-dried foods. things like that, the moisture content of the food is confusing to the body. They really would expect to have the cellular contents intact and all the moisture in each cell of the foods that they're eating. And that doesn't happen with the dried food. So that can be confusing for the body. The fiber can help a little bit with that. But again, it's not just the same thing as adding water to a food to really help that motility. The water, if it's like saying, oh, I just went and bought a car, and here, instead of having the whole car, they give you a whole box full of all the compressed down components in a box and say, here's some oil and here's some gas, and good luck with that. You have to know how to put that all together, and the body does better when it's already in its original form, so it knows how to digest. The feeding architecture in general for me has a lot to do with the form of the food, again, as we're talking about there, that it's in its natural shape, but also in the way that the food is processed. And then things like dog food bowls on the floor. They shouldn't be raised because you're changing how the dog is eating and swallowing air. Better with their heads down and they're swallowing with their heads down. Also, I'm not a big fan of slowing a dog down from eating. I don't know if you've ever heard the term wolf it down, but wolf it down is because that's what they do. They wolf it down. So if you have appropriate, moisture appropriate food, they should be able to eat in 10 seconds, which again, all of my dogs do, because it's fresh food and down it goes. They don't really have chewing, grinding teeth. They're not supposed to be tasting the food and savoring it. They're supposed to just wolf it down. So, and then a lot of things, enjoying things, they're chewing on the things they're supposed to chew on. So the chewing teeth they do have, which are actually just, again, shearing more, are going to be wanting to chew on raw bones. So give your dog a bone, another cliche, but yes, a fresh raw bone, amazing for them. That's the kind of chewing they just sit there on a big bone and just really gnaw at it and get their Zen moment. So those kinds of things are important. So as I said, a good diet can't cure all ills, but a bad diet will always cause problems. So I saw that a lot in the elephants that I treated in the zoo, and then seeing them in the wild in Africa made me realize how, even when I thought we were doing a very good job, we were not even close to the kinds of things that they need. I mean, this kind of action, they're digging, what they do with their feet, how they move around. They're getting a lot of soil and microbes when they're eating this, and they're shaking it off, but they're eating it as well. That keeps their GI tract healthy and it keeps them functioning properly. You need to go back to nature and think what's happening ancestrally in order to properly get to what's going to keep an animal healthy. So just watching that, I used to treat elephants a lot with acupuncture for all of their joint diseases and foot problems, and they had other issues, mental issues, and it just makes me sad. It's because we're not doing the right thing. So just the overview, I like people to know this. If you haven't seen this before, just my general feeling on diet is that there's the protein, the fat, the carbohydrate, the fiber, the amounts are all on here. And then looking at the micronutrients as well. So the macronutrients are really the protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And those are sort of my percentages roughly. And then fiber, I do like to really think about that. And we're looking at different types of fiber to help the microbiome. The amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals, the fibers, they should be balanced, or at least be provided in an appropriate way so that you know if you're unbalanced, how to balance that maybe the next day. So just taking a random approach isn't good enough anymore. We know enough to be able to say, yeah, I'm not going to have a perfectly balanced diet maybe every day, but I know I'm missing a lot of magnesium and iodine in this diet, so I'm going to be making sure that they get it in the next one. We should know what we're doing. It's not right to just say we're going to guess. And then, the quality and sourcing of the ingredients. I think it's absolutely essential that we know where these things are coming from. Are there pesticides, again, humane treatment, digestibility, what's happening with the nutrient value of the foods, and then global care. We do care about the planet. I consider planet Earth to be my largest patient. All right, so I feel like everybody understands sort of what proteins are. They understand proteins are out there. They're comprised of amino acids. People understand what carbohydrates are. It's sugar, simple sugars. It's going to be starches and all of those types of things. I feel like fats are always a weird, scary place for people. I don't know why. So I'm just going to give you this. overview of fats. There's a lot of different kinds of fats, and people don't even really necessarily think about that very much. But it's not good or bad fats. There's just no such thing as good or bad fats, and that kind of conversation is just wrong. It is really about balanced fats. So you have to balance the fats first when you're dealing with a recipe. That's how I look at every recipe. I think about balancing the fats in there, making sure that I've got the fats that I need to keep the animal healthy. And they are so important for health. They're just absolutely the pillar building block for every diet. So in terms of an emergency out there, the fat disaster that's going on in so many foods is probably my number one, concern, aside from, of course, everything else. Sourcing and everything else. But we just don't understand it. So there's saturated fats, there's unsaturated fats. And there's fats that are, which means really where are the bonds in terms of how well the molecule itself is either saturated with its bonds, or if there's a polyunsaturated, there's unsaturated. So that's all organic chemistry. You don't really have to understand that as much as just to know that they are going to be out there and they're going to be different and they do different things. Like a saturated fat, like butter, is pretty stable. And that's lovely. So, you can keep butter out for a while and it'll oxidize a little bit, but it's pretty stable. Bone marrow inside of a bone, incredibly stable fat. It can sit at room temperature for a couple of weeks and not start to smell or do anything weird. Whereas you have the polyunsaturated fats, like the fish oil, fish oils, wow, yeah, those go rancid pretty quickly. They start to change. They're very, very unstable. And that's relevant in a pet food. So if you're having a lot of fish products in a dry food that's sitting on the counter, that's going to be rancid within a week. And maybe you won't smell it so much. Maybe you won't tell because there's different types of flavor enhancers in there, but that's not a good thing to have. So you want to make sure that you are protecting your fats with things like, like vitamin E, things like that help to stabilize those fats. So your polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly like omega-6s and omega-3s, there's a lot of talk about omega-6s. They're bad. They're not bad. They just have to be in a good balance with your omega-3s. Right. So, and they're really important. They're important fats for different functions, for the skin, for the body, for the brain. So you need omega-6s, you need omega-3s. You just need them in a good ratio. And you also need to be able to have them in a form that the animals can convert. So the omega-3s that are in a lot of the plant versions are not converted efficiently in carnivores. So the plant versions of the omega-3s really need to have the translation going on with the animal's metabolic system. And the carnivores don't do that so well. So we add a fish oil or something like that to help them absorb that better. And then there's others, there's omega-9s. And then we get to like MCTs in coconut oil or coconut oil itself. I don't usually use it for ketogenic or for brain function or things like that. So that's useful fat. There's obviously, as I mentioned, a difference between vegetable versus meat fats, and you should know that you need a balance of that. And we're learning a lot more about fats and balancing fats and how they're important for cognitive health, for training for puppies, how they can help manage epilepsy and other brain issues. But if you don't have enough fats in a puppy or kitten food, you've got some serious problems in terms of training ahead of you. So it's an important thing to keep in mind. And then fats and oils in general, where are they? Like where are you finding your omega-6s? So in ruminant meat is very low in omega-6s, especially linoleic acid. So if you're balancing a food, you might want to add some to that food because they need that for the skin. You'll maybe start to see some skin problems. Poultry meat is very high in omega-6s. So you're never really going to want to add too much omega-6 to any food that you're formulating with a poultry. Vegetable oils can contain a mix of different things, but they'll have a lot of omega-6s. The omega-3 fatty acids for our carnivores are best really from a fish oil. So ruminant meat is low in omega-3s. Poultry is even lower in omega-3s. Fish is very high in omega-3s. So that's just some basic information about fats that I think is very, very important for diets. And we should know that there's been a change in our commercial world in what we can buy and what we eat. So it's interesting that on average, the omega-6-3 ratio for grass-fed cattle is 2-1, which is really considered a relatively healthy ratio. The omega-6-3 ratio for grain-fed cattle is 9-1. The higher the ratio, the higher the inflammatory component. So that's our problem, is what's the ratio? So human beings evolved on a diet with an omega-6-3 fatty acid ratio of approximately 1-1. It was actually, that's ancestral. The ratio today in the Western diets is around 20-1, which is clearly going to be inflammatory for us. Sorry. So it's going to be the same problem for our pets. I did hear in the talk before just saying, you know, we compared a healthy diet to a Western one. That just makes me so sad, and it's so true, right? So, you know, we have healthy diets and we have Western diets. So, and this is that's one of the reasons that that's happening. So the fish oil, really important to add it at the time of feeding so that it's not going rancid in the foods, or it gets affected by freezing, it gets affected by oxygen, by time, by pressure, lots of different things. And heat. So you really do want to be careful with your omega-3s. And if you can add them at the time of feeding, so much the better. 2 to 3 times a week, because excess omega-3 can cause the same signs as a deficiency: dry skin, dandruff, itchy skin, and you won't know the difference. And if you're giving a supplement every single day, the body doesn't have a chance to catch its breath. So I really find that I need it just a few times a week to just give what we need and get the body to use what it needs to have. So and be careful, because you can do too much also just at a time, and that can upset the GI tract. Okay. So again, coconut oil, not typically used to balance fats. It has MCTs in it, useful for brain health. It's used as a supplement or a treat. I'll sometimes, maybe once a week, give like a teaspoon to my smaller dogs, or a tablespoon to my 50-pound dog. And you can use the MCT oil if you've got a disease or epilepsy, or you're trying to do a ketogenic diet for cancer. You can use an MCT oil to get a little bit more, but you use significantly less when you're doing that. All right. So I just thought also, from an emergency standpoint, it's nice to know, okay, what do I do if I want to do a really great diet? We have tips in the Animal Diet Formulator software. Sorry. Okay. We have tips. Yeah. Yes.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Fun. Okay. We have tips in there to help you sort of just get started if you're going to be starting and balancing foods. We got it for dogs, so we got it for cats. And then I've got, you know, a lot of things that we'll put on the formulator to talk about what to avoid and what to put in. So all of those things, you can get help with that if you have a program or an education that helps you learn what you really need to put into each food, each recipe. In cancer prevention, we really do talk a lot about the anti-inflammatory diets, ketogenic diets, and things like that. And so but that's also something that I really recommend when you're talking about emergencies or inflammation. We really should be thinking about decreasing carbs, of course, and doing that. But we want to make sure that we're, you know, getting foods that are adding to the health rather than taking away from health at all times. So I do rhinoceros, apples, you know, are one of the foods that you can add in that actually have a lot of health benefits. But there's a lot of other ones. So mushrooms are big. Any mushroom that you can eat, I cook it up in butter and give it to your pet. It can really be helpful for so many reasons. There's a lot that are research that we go to immediately that say, oh, you know, this is the one that that helps with brain health, or this is the one that's really great for cancer. But, you know, just because it's turkey tail doesn't mean that other mushrooms are not doing the same thing. They're amazing. And so just any mushroom, I would say. There's the superfoods, there's fibers, there's sunflower oil, sardines, bone broths, glucosamine, boswellia, Rehmannia 8. These are all just supplements that I use regularly. Hawthorn berry for heart conditions, coenzyme Q10 for heart vascular issues. You know, vitamin D is always something you're thinking about and testing for, if you can, for any cancer, also just inflammation. L-glutamine, CBDs can be great. And then, you know, raw bones for me are really big, and then the moisture content always matters, as we said. Okay. So what you put in the food bowl is the most important health decision that you can make. There are the one thing that I do like to say is that the reason why we know for sure that we should be avoiding carbs in things like cancer is because if you just look at the one way that we find cancer, we use a PET scan, which is a small amount of a radioactive tracer in glucose. And then we watch how that, when we inject it into the vein, goes straight to a cancer. So if you really don't want to be feeding a lot of sugar to your cancers, because that's what cancers are looking for. I just thought that's really an interesting way to look at it. Okay, so this is sort of, again, just that overview to give you an idea when I'm dealing with cancer, but inflammation, how you want to address that. And don't forget our advanced glycation end products as problems. So the data is definitely showing that there's a correlation between age-related diseases and the intake of the AGEs, the advanced glycation end products, and that's just in the processed food, right? So that's processing food. It's not just there, but it's such a big part of it. The high heat processed foods, they're sort of everywhere in a certain sense, but you just don't want to add them if you can avoid adding them. So so many people understand that ultra-processed food is recognized for its negative effect on health, but somehow we're just not thinking about it in pet food. We're not paying attention to that emergency. And we need to, again, get that out there. There's tons of research, and I've got some of that here. Fresh food is definitely better. I'll just fly through this so that you've got the slides if you need them. And then there's, information about even the USDA human guidelines are saying, do more fresh food. And while at the same time, we're saying, go ahead and do this processed food. So won't go into the weight loss thing, but don't forget the microbiome. It's super important, and it's usually delivered in our environment. And we have a lot of animals that don't get a good microbiome, injection into their world because they live in our houses and they go on sidewalks and they don't ever get out into the wild and get this kind of dirt and dust and grossness in their food. So, and we are giving them antibiotics and pesticides and things that are out there. So again, remember, that's really important. And that's part of our emergencies, that we don't have a healthy biome. So we need to do more biome support.
Sorry, Bart.
That feedback is there. I think I'm done.
Yeah, look in the mail. That's a good spot.
We don't care. I'm just going to throw these through, and they're just things, if someone wanted to look at them, they can. And those are, we're back to that. Okay, there we go. And I'm done.
Super.